Hi, I'm Torte de Lini. With the release of patch 7.37, mid laners from 7.36 have kept their popularity because they can achieve two key areas. One, securing CS farming, including nearby stacked jungle camps, and two, ganking the side lanes in their early game. Heroes like Ember Spirit and Primal Beast do this very well, whereas heroes like Shadow Fiend have had their efficiency nerfed to 7.37. So with that said, let's check in on which heroes are standing strong this patch according to my expertise and data from Dota2Projector.com. Oh, and my in-game hero builds are finally updated to patch 7.37 with over 1,100 changes, so check them out in-game now. Why in the howdy do is Ember Spirit still not significantly nerfed? He was strong in 7.37, he was strong in 7.35, he's just an all-around great hero for every matchup or pace of the game, and I really can't fathom why the developers refuse to reduce this hero's capabilities. In 7.37, they tried to curb down his early game by increasing the mana cost of his Searing Chains and splitting up Flame Guard with a new innate ability, Immolation, which passively deals damage around him and cannot scale up until you put points in his ultimate ability. For most Ember players, they are not putting more points in Fire Remnant until later in the match, so now there's a punishment, sort of, to that by having a weaker Immolation damage. Flame Guard also had its magic damage barrier increased, but its damage lowered by 5, at all levels to make room for Immolation, and more emphasize Flame Guard to be more defensive than an offensive intent, which is how it's currently being treated. All this said, the hero is still too strong for several reasons. 1. The goated ability, Slate of Fist. Combined with the double impact facet, Ember Spirit guarantees last hit on range creeps every single time at no risk to Ember, and it's such an annoying harassment tool on top of that. What's more is that Slate of Fist is also a vehicle for you to farm stack jungle camps with Maelstrom, and part of your initiation in the early game to land Searing Chains on enemies perfectly. Later on, Slate of Fist is a consistent damage dealer and performed as you amp up the effects like Mage Slayer, Gleipnir, and Shiva's Guard. Remember, it deals bonus damage on top of your regular attack, so you are just laying it hard, and now that your innate ability Immolation is persistently on, you are also dealing damage through that too. Bottom line, it's just too good of an ability at all points of the game because it can achieve everything at a low cooldown, high damage, and most importantly, minimal risk. 2. Why doesn't this hero just Searing Chains my balls? Because if you didn't know, in 7.35, they raised the Searing Chains unit count from 2 to 3, so it's a lot more forgiving to ensnare the heroes you want, even if there's a creep in the mix that you didn't account for. So that's 110 damage on 3 units every second for 3 seconds on a 7-second cooldown. That ability scales incredibly well because at level 15 and 20, you can actually up the duration and damage, so you are dealing 680 damage from a distance with Slate of Fist, which coincidentally also has a 6-second cooldown. Though typically people only grab those talents if they select the Chain Gang facet, regardless, it's all a perfect fit of massive nuking damage dressed with any toppings of items you want to hurt enemies with items like Gleipnir for the double AoE root power and Shiva's Guard to keep them slowed even as the enemies try to flee. And lastly, number 3, strong scaling. We touched upon it already, but with a hero's comfort in laning now, an easy lead up to ganking with his power spike timing, with the addition of items like Mage Slayer at 12 minutes, and his ability to farm with Maelstrom, the hero scales up his output in teamfights from the mid to late to very late game. The level 15, 20, and 25 talents include more damage output like 100% Flame Guard DPS, Slate of Fist damage, and more charges of Slate of Fist to spam in fights. And Slate of Fist is both great for seeking high ground and rooting enemies with the Searing Chains from afar, or to simply stall out and defend your own high ground against enemies. Your items also function similarly too, where items like Archery Core is just monstrous for a hero that wants to use all his abilities repeatedly. There's also Ag Shard, where Ember Spirit can deal more burn damage to enemies without risk, and there's also the Ag Scepter, where he has the flexibility to split push lanes, reposition if somehow caught out, etc. All in all, the hero only has upsides and is very easy to pick up for most players. Don't forget to use Fire Remnant to either talent portal back to base and return to a lane. It's a great way to refill your bottle or as a way to gank a side lane and immediately return back to your mid lane to reduce any loss experience from the missed waves. Lina is really coming into her own since her change in 7.27, which accentuates her late game output from a single target killer to a late game powerhouse damage dealer, thanks to her new innate ability, Combustion. Basically, Combustion rewards Lina for dealing additional damage to nearby foes of your main target after they receive 150 damage. Now, it may seem like 40 damage at max level is nothing, but you have to be aware that Combustion occurs whether you deal damage as a spell or as an auto attack. So late game, when Lina has her Gleipnir, Daedalus, and even an MKB, each of her attacks, which comes at a very fast rate because of Fiery Soul, will essentially melt nearby enemies as well. What's more is that if she deals a massive nuke spell like evidently Laguna Blade or a critical strike from her physical attack, she will deal additional combustion damage for every 150 damage reached. So a typical late game Lina with max fiery souls will deal something like 450 to 600 damage every 0.3 seconds to the main target, and thus a maximum of 180 additional damage to every enemy near her target per second. That's honestly insane, combined with the chance of dealing chain lightning from Maelstrom, and that combustion also extends to your mid-game farming once you've picked up a few items, so taking out stacked jungle camps will also be incredibly swift for a hero that is already known for really fast farming. The other half of her is that she is a great mid lane hero. We don't really talk about the slow burn facet because it's effectively making securing last hits with your Dragon Slave all the more harder, but also because it segments your nuking damage into a damage over time burn effect that gives enemy players a chance to survive. The thermal runaway facet is where it's at because it gives you even more fiery soul value, which plays well into our combustion, as we'll have plenty of attack damage to meet the 150 damage threshold and just need the attack speed to compound that combustion damage. Lina is very meta because she punishes teams that deathball together, and a lot of popular mid laners can't handle her, like Shadow Fiend, Puck, and Void Spear, where her massive attack range, decent damage, and high attack speed with an endless supply of Dragon Slave just makes it hard for squishy heroes to survive. And because she can go items like Gluttony and Hurricane Pike, combined with Light Strike Array, she does a fantastic job keeping this patch's carry heroes at bay like Ursa, Sven, and even Wind Ranger. They are also all susceptible to Lina's Laguna Blade ultimate since they don't really build to survive that kind of nuking damage, and mostly rely on their high armor like Sven's Warcry or evasive maneuverability like Wind Ranger's Wind Run to outlast their foes and dish their damage. Other than that, her build is fairly straightforward. She loves going Gluttony like King Bar to guarantee follow through on her lockdown, spells, and physical attack, and then Daedalus is a no-brainer for the reasons we named above, and to capitalize on your fiery soul attack speed. By the way, if you need help with your game, check me out live on Twitch where I regularly answer your questions daily while testing all your favorite hero builds. If you love the channel and want to see more videos, please like and subscribe. Over 83% of my audience last month were from drive-by viewers, and you could be part of the cool 17% who are subscribed. I absolutely love Primal Beast, and he is as popular as ever, whether as an offlaner or mid laner. His laning is decent since he can rely on Onslaught and Trample to not only damage the enemy hero across from you, but also to shove the wave and secure his stacked jungle camps with Trample again. That's usually what he does against most aggressive mid laners to soak up as much XP and start ganking at level 6. What really makes Primal Beast so popular this meta is that he's a mid-game tempo maker that doesn't really need items and thus only builds what keeps him around continuing to trample. So items like Blade Mail, Black King Bar, Pup of Insight if you're offlane are all items that we regularly see first on Primal Beast and capitalizes on his ability to charge into a fight, pulverize and trample around, and the enemy either has to flee, knowing full well they're slower than Primal Beast, or try to fight back, which is mitigated by your first items. With just phase boots and blade mail if need be, you are rotating and ganking a lot because Primal Beast isn't about winning his mid lane, at best he evens out. He's all about securing the side lane's advantage. Thanks to his innate ability Colossal, you can actually now follow through on all your roaming kills to finally take towers. Finally, you can actually see a result of all your hard work with actual tier 1 and tier 2 towers falling. Heads up though that the hero is a great mid-game tempo maker, but he falls off into the late game as enemies start outliving your trample and your pulverize is not the longest stun duration out there. You need to keep the pressure on and try to close out before enemies eventually outpace you. Items like Blink Dagger, Shiva's Guard can help you be more pervasive in fights, but honestly the Ag Scepter is your crown jewel as the damage and break is really strong against popular heroes in this meta like Ursa, Underlord, Sven, and more. But also because it pairs well with your level 15 talent where you can dispel slows and debuffs by casting Uproar every 7 seconds. In terms of guide changes, his recent change in 7.37 has made Uproar a level 1 pick for the mid lane, which means you no longer need to spend gold on a Quelling Blade since Uproar gives you a bit of damage there. Other than that, I also threw in a Windlace in the early game, and essentially we should view Windlace similar to a Bracer or Null Talisman in that it provides additional value for a little bit of cost. In the case of Primal Beast, thanks to his facet, Romp and Stomp, the Windlace movement speed is amplified by the percentage granted from the facet's trample ability. There's a new trend with Leshrac where instead of the facet Carnoptic Nourishment, which really helps with your laning stage as it capitalizes on your right-click harassment on enemy heroes and creeps with mana, Leshrac players are now opting for Misanthropy, which shortens your Diabolic Eater duration, and thus the damage output is more compacted in a smaller time frame. In 7.37, they buffed this by reducing that duration from 7 seconds to now 6 seconds, and that means you are dealing your total Diabolic Edict damage within a small time frame, giving you a stronger guarantee you'll kill your targets within your Split Earth stun duration and mini slow from Lightning Storm. The downside is that you cannot hit towers anymore with Diabolic Edict, and that is a loss to the usual style of Leshrac. But honestly, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things if the upside is that you are securing kills quickly and thus giving room for your team to push down towers for you. In this deathball-like meta, Leshrac's ability to push down towers comes second to the ability to snowball fast and have massive magic damage output come from your first ganks in the game. Another way to think about it is that pushing towers is really appealing early game to establish map control, whereas winning teamfights and before that, ganks is more prioritized and much more applicable throughout the game. So common items you see for Leshrac are 1. Blink to initiate with a gank with your Diabolic Edict and Pulse Nova already activated beforehand. Number 2, Bloodstone, where Misanthropy now synergizes even more with it, as the duration to activate Bloodstone is 5 seconds and Misanthropy lasts about 6 seconds, meaning you are recuperating a lot of the health back since your Diabolic Edict explosions are occurring at a more rapid pace. Number 3, Shiva's Guard, Black King Bar, Sanj, and Yasha, all items that enable you to survive, increase your mana regen, and spell lifesteal, while also giving you more presence in a fight. So in terms of guide update, I've redone the skill build to max out Diabolic Edict, as you can completely bully out the mid lane by straight up walking towards them with Diabolic Edict if they're out of position and when the creep wave is wiped, and your item build now prioritizes items like Blink Dagger and Bloodstone while moving items like Agshard and Yules away from the core build. Besides Ember or Lina, Puck holds her own against a lot in this meta. To be honest, you will probably not win your lane every time, but that's just growing pains as you play a hero that has a lot of maneuverability, difficult to catch, but can shut down and catch fleeing enemies really easily, like Primal Beast or even Ember post-laning stage. Puck combos really well with Darkseer, Enigma, Mars, heroes that basically keep the enemies in place and close together for your ultimate, AoE silence, and more. Her early game and even beyond has had its mana issues alleviated, where disjointing attacks or spells gives back some of her mana through her innate ability, Puckish. This also worked with Yules, on top of the fact that Yules gives you more time to live between phase shift or even waiting on Illusory Orb to telegraph your gateway. One more thing to note is that Puck has the 6th highest base intelligence and the 3rd highest intelligence gain, so her right click power is actually quite astounding and one of the reasons why she picks up Witchblade, eventually Parasma, as her ultimate lasts a relatively long time and your right click has power. Ultimately, the appeal for Puck is a decently low cooldown ultimate ability that pairs well with today's meta on top of her strong scalable right click power. Her survivability is alleviated due to the aura meta of this patch, while also bringing to the forefront her respectful contributions through AoE spells. In terms of honorable mentions, I want to highlight Queen of Pain real quick. The hero is not exactly the best, but she has such a unique build right now revolving around just rushing Dagon. We talked about this build before in a previous video, but in this patch it seems to be going one step further by rushing Dagon all the way to level 5, which is quite rare. Since 7.36, the developers have been pushing the level of Dagon through her facet Masochist. The Masochist facet essentially gives Queen of Pain 15% spell amplification, but takes 20% of it back, so the more damage you deal to enemies with Scream of Pain, Shadow Strike, or Sonic Wave, the more damage Queen of Pain takes back. In 7.36b, they lowered that reflective damage from 22 to 20%, so it's a bit more forgiving for the hero. In 7.37, they made the spell lifesteal scaling for Dagon, so each level gives a bit more, which is only really valuable to, let's say, Queen of Pain, and maybe a Beastmaster late game with Drums of Slum. So the logic is simple. With the Masochist facet, you forego harassment in the lane beyond your auto attack and focus on securing runes to replenish your mana as you shove waves and farm nearby jungle camps with your Scream of Pain. This should get you pretty close to a 11 minute or 12 minute Dagon. The appeal for Dagon with Masochist is a two-parter. 1. Dagon with Masochist is almost 1 full level more in damage, so you're playing at an early timing that insta kills most enemies with your spells. And number 2, Dagon has spell lifesteal, so using on catapults or creeps insta kills that unit and gives you 1000 health back. So after a fight, you can zap a quick creep to regain your life immediately back as you return to the mid lane. Evidently, the spell lifesteal also plays off, or rather trades off, with the Masochist downside. Other items you can opt for are Kaya and Kaya Sanj because they lower the mana cost of your spells and items while also replenishing the mana more quickly. So the importance to rush Dagon is more about timing and opportunity than anything else, as Queen of Pain starts to fall off where other mid laners like Ember Spirit really become stronger and contributory in fights. That said, if you can snowball your early game with Queen of Pain, you can really help your team wrap the game up before other heroes would typically be able to come online. Despite her somewhat 50% win rate, she's a fairly popular pick in the meta as it tries to be more fast-paced and game-ending than ever before. Alright, mid laners done. Stay tuned for pause for our offlane supports, and let me know in the comments which heroes you've been winning with in the mid lane. Bitch.